You are listening to the How to Talk to Girls podcast with me, Trip Kramer. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the How to Talk to Girls podcast. I'm your host, Trip Kramer from tripadvice.com. And today we are revisiting a topic that I just love to talk about. And I enjoy interviewing guests on the topic because it's not something that's fixed overnight. I even mentioned that in this interview. It's not something that is just so easy to conquer. It's really completely changing who you are, but for the better. In a weird way, it's really just becoming more about who you are. We even talk about that on the episode. We talk about this idea of it's not about adding, right? It's not about like changing and adding. It's about subtracting, right? Taking things away, meaning taking some personality traits away from you and some fears and some insecurities to shed those layers and become who you are so you can naturally become a guy who is attractive. And yes, in a weird way, you are naturally going to be a bad boy, so to speak, because we're going to be getting rid of that nice guy. So in today's episode, I interview Mr. Carlos Xuma, who's been doing coaching since 2002. He's been around for a very long time. He even says in the interview that he was not mentioned in the book, The Game. He was one of the very few who was not mentioned, but he was in the circles with all those guys. So all the guys who were pioneering in terms of learning how to meet women and taking this as an actual study, right? So actually taking information and learning how to do this, because this hasn't been around for forever, right? So it was very underground for a long time. And now, of course, you can find podcasts on it, although not many. There doesn't seem to be a lot of podcasts for guys on dating. I seem to be one of the few who are doing it. But there's a lot of information out there, and he is one of the first people who's actually taught it. We even talk a little bit about the fact that he doesn't teach guys anymore. He's starting to focus more on women, but he still has a lot of amazing information on how to attract women and how to destroy that nice guy and become the bad boy. If you need help with getting to the point where you need that consistent reconstruction of yourself and that shedding and destroying that nice guy, becoming the bad boy, I specifically help with this in the Trip Advice coaching program, where we do calls every week and you and I are texting throughout the week and making sure that you're getting to the point where you're attracting the women you want because you are the guy who is actually desirable. Like, can a guy transform themselves to be a guy who's naturally desirable to women if they weren't in the past? The answer is yes, they can. It's very possible. I was that person. And I've worked with guys every single day on becoming that person, and it works. The system works, but you'd have to know what to do. And more importantly, held accountable to be able to do it. That's what coaching is for. So if you want to apply, please do today. The applications are coming in every day. So this is your chance. Go to coachedbytrip.com and you and I will hop on a phone call and see if coaching is a good fit for you. And I would absolutely love to work with you. I really enjoy working with guys who listen to the podcast and know exactly what they want out of their dating life. And even if you don't, we'll help you discover that even on the initial call that is for free that you and I get on. So go to coachedbytrip.com today and apply. And for now, here's some really great mindset, some great tips in terms of destroying the nice guy, becoming the bad boy. Here's my interview with Carlos. Hey, Carlos. Good to have you back on the podcast. How's it going, man?
It's going great. It's hard to believe it's been so long, but yeah, it's good to be back and talking about helping these guys.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know that it's been a while because you've been focusing a little bit more on helping women in terms of dating advice. Is that right?
Yeah, that's kind of been my focus since about like 2013 or 14. I kind of slid over into helping women out, and it's been really interesting because then I can go back to each side and give them the intel on what the other one is thinking and wanting.
I'm curious, what's one big issue that women have in terms of dating? Like, what's their biggest question?
Well, the biggest thing that women ask about is, why does he pull away from me? Why does he grow distant? Why does he go cold? That whole thing. And if you ask a guy that, he's going to be like, well, I mean, for the ones that really it registers for them, because a lot of times I think guys do it on a subconscious level. We just need space on occasion. And when we're with another guy and we do that, it's not a big deal. But for a woman, it feels like you just unplug the power on her. And So she doesn't understand what drives that in a man. And what I usually end up explaining to women is that guys reclaim their masculinity by being alone, by going quiet, by focusing inward. It's just a natural thing for us to do to kind of collect ourselves. So that's like the biggest thing that women want to know. And the funny part is, inevitably, the best solution is just transparency about it. Like, if a guy knows that he's doing that, tell the woman. If the woman understands that the guy does that, she should tell him that she understands. Once you bring it out in the open, the elephant's in the room, so to speak. It's so easy to fix.
Got it. Interesting. All right. Well, that's good to know. But today we're talking about more advice for guys. So we're going to switch your brain into dating advice for guy mode and pick your brain in terms of talking about nice guy versus bad boy. And I know we dabbled into this topic 4 years ago when I had you on the podcast. We talked about being a bad boy and some of those things. But today we're going to talk about that and also kind of compare it to the nice guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you think this is a big issue that guys have? Like, did you see this as a big issue when you were, because when you were coaching guys, I wasn't even really a coach yet. You were doing this for a long time. So
Yeah.
did you find that this was a big issue for guys?
Yeah, I mean, I started doing this in about 2002. So that dates me. And actually, if you want to talk about all the research and all the time I spent trying to figure out how this all worked, it goes back into the 90s, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, it's been a problem for a long time. And it was a problem with me. That's how I identified it. Was I was brought up by a really strict dad who was a really good male role model. But even I found myself kind of wussing out when it came to women. I would inevitably fall into these patterns of behavior. Every guy relates to it, where you want to be nice to her because men are programmed to want to make women happy. I mean, it's just the way we are. That's one of our built-in programming, but unfortunately, we don't temper that with a certain amount of solidity in our own self, our own confidence, our own sense of masculinity, if you will. And that's where this whole spectrum, if you will, of the nice guy on one side and the bad boy over on the other, you got to learn how to move the pendulum between those two. It's not a stationary thing where you're just trying to get way over there on bad boy side. No, it's really knowing how to swing that pendulum back and forth to achieve a balance.
And why is it important to do that?
Well, first of all, you're not three-dimensional if you stick to either one of them. Being able to see, on the nice guy end of the spectrum, the good part about it is there's compassion there. That's what's really making a nice guy nice, is he's compassionate. But at the same time, you take that compassion too far and you don't end up being very masculine in your energy. On the other side, you've got the bad boyish side. That one has the bad edge of being a jerk. But the good side of that is that it broadcasts confidence, it has solidity, it has certainty, which is something everybody looks for in life, is a certain element of, stability and grounding. That's why we're so attracted to people who are so sure of themselves. Men are attracted to women that act that way, and women are attracted to men that act that way.
That's interesting that you say that. I never really thought to describe it in that way. You're saying that there's a certainty or a groundedness in the bad boy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, certainty is the fundamental element of what we call self-confidence. Whenever a guy says, "Man, I just wish I was more confident." Well, what you're really talking about, because confidence is nebulous. There's no such thing as confidence. There's not this injection of a certain feeling in you that makes you confident. What it really is a lack of uncertainty. It's a lack of this little voice in your head that tells you, "I don't know what I'm doing, man. I don't think I can do this right. I don't think that voice is what creates this uncertainty and lack of self-confidence. If you get rid of it, you're automatically confident. That's what you are when you're not being haggled by these voices in your head telling you you're inadequate, you're not enough, all that stuff.
So it's more of a default state than anything.
Yeah, definitely.
So it sounds like in order to be confident, it's not about adding, but it's about removing.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of, this is where I do a lot of different work now than I used to. I do coaching, I do certain kinds of spiritual guide work for my clients. And one of the things is this understanding that a lot of becoming healthy, a lot of recognizing your issues and laying them aside, it's not even, what was the word you just used to describe that?
Like a default?
Yeah, you said default. You said it was more of not doing or more of,
Yeah, it's what I'm gathering from what you're saying is confidence is a default. So it's not about adding, it's not trying to
right.
be confident, it's about subtracting, taking all the way the things that are making you less confident.
Yes. And even subtracting implies this action to remove something. What it really is kind of quelling and calming and soothing and ignoring the voice, this agitation that comes up in us when we feel uncertain or we feel like we have a lack of self confidence. They, in psychological circles, they call this the fragmented self. When you were a kid, maybe your dad yelled at you about something and wouldn't never let up, and you develop this kind of issue around it, right? And we all recognize these things that we got from our parents or we got from our siblings. But that's what steps in. It's these habituated thoughts that jump into our head. And if you can relax them, because if you try and push them out, they don't go away so nicely. They're like really obnoxious fraternity brothers that just won't leave you alone. You can't kick them out, but you can kind of shut them up so that they don't bother you, and they can actually help fuel you in a lot of ways.
You know what's interesting too is because I know that there are some bad boys or, some of these guys that are considered bad boys who are actually not confident. They're in a weird way, they're insecure,
Yeah.
but they show confidence. But the reason why they, are called bad boys is because they might treat people kind of crappy due to insecurity. So I'm curious your thought on that. Like, what's the balance there of this guy who is confident, but also in a similar vein, insecure?
hmm
Any thoughts on
That's
that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of guys resist this idea of being a bad boy just for that exact same reason, because they view it as this guy that's basically a jerk. I mean, his whole bad boyness is kind of a, I don't want to say sociopathic, but it could go that far. Kind of a lack of refinement. He's not tuned in to other people. He doesn't seem compassionate. He seems like kind of a dick, and you're just like, well, that's not what you want to be. And I get that. And that's one of the reasons I created the program that I have called Bad Boy Formula, is understanding that the bad boy is actually, when you find a cool one who it has the capability of being a really kind of a cool dude, he doesn't come across as bad boy. He just comes across as being, he's got a little bit of an edge to him in a lot of ways. So yeah, you're
So
absolutely right. A guy doesn't want to have that. And those guys that are doing that, by the way, they're beyond bad boy. They're into jerk territory. So the extreme on the bad boy end of the spectrum is jerk, or all the words you want to use to call that, jerkweed, all that on that end. And then on the nice guy end of the scale, same thing. There's extremes to either end. Bad boy is a little bit shy of that end of the spectrum. He's just enough on the confidence side that women get it. They see that he gets it.
right, okay. So then how do you get that bad boy edge? Because I know that's what you teach. So, for a guy who's listening right now who couldn't ever imagine being that stereotypical alpha male, bad boy, riding motorcycle, fighting people,
Yeah.
whatever that kind of stereotypical look is, like I bet you that they're thinking on that level. But how does a guy like, who listens to this podcast, a guy who used to be like me, like I was a guy who never could imagine tapping into some of those qualities. Like, how do you get that bad boy edge? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the first step is really simple, but it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. And that is, you got to be honest with yourself first, really. You got to be able to admit to yourself, you know what? You're a guy and you want to sleep with hot women. It's natural. It's totally natural. And society has done this thing of shaming men into thinking that their desires are wrong and that they hurt women. There's a lot of movements going on right now, and I'm sure there will be in the future, social movements and whatnot. And we're all familiar with the whole Me Too movement. And that was a necessary thing that had to happen, by the way. I'm not in any way talking that down. Yet, in order to correct those things, media loves to jump on stuff like that. They'll send out messages that will totally confuse guys and make them believe that, their desires, their natural desires to be a man, are wrong. And, they're shameful in some way. They hurt women, and that's just not cool. that's the first thing is you really just got to be honest with yourself. Admit that you're a natural red-blooded guy and you have that desire, because trying to do anything else with that is going to give you kind of a creepy edge, quite honestly. Then you got to admit that another thing you admit to yourself is that you've fallen into the trap of acting like someone you're not to get a woman interested in you. Because really nice guys are just as bad as jerks. They are just as bad because they're suppressing, they're weaseling a lot of ways to get themselves in a position to attract a woman, and that's not good either. Guys have been pummeled into this shameful corner where we just appear to be violent dogs of the world. All we are is we're either idiots on TV or we're killing machines in the movies. It's just kind of silly. There's no balanced representation of what guys should be like. And I think guys everywhere are realizing that. And it's one of the reasons I actually got into teaching guys in the first place, was to help them understand this dynamic.
Yeah. It's funny you say that too, because in the media, yeah, you see Killing Machine. What was the other one you said? A guy who's like an idiot.
The idiot doofus that can't, like Raymond on that show from way back. These guys that are just total wussy losers.
Right. Or I would add to that and say, or you get this nerd, right? Like the super nerd, like the Screech from Saved by the Bell, or I don't know, any other nerd, that somehow gets the girl in all these movies, and it's so unrealistic. It's like they portray guys and of course they have to, right? That's Hollywood, that's the media, that's what makes it entertaining and interesting, like strong characters. But you have these characters and you don't really want to relate to any of these guys. Like, these are not the guys to be,
Yeah, exactly.
In the end, it's not the guy that actually gets the girl. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I would say. And that's a good, another good stereotype that they throw in there. He has the nerdy goofball guy. And I think guys understand when they see these movies that they don't resonate. There's an element of storytelling that does work, which makes it all the more confusing. But movies, TV, those are engineered for, most of the time, for women. A lot of guys don't realize that the most programming, most of that stuff is geared and aimed towards women, because they know guys are going to be taking their women out to a movie. There's all these little things, and the money is going to drive that. So it's not a massive conspiracy. It's just kind of the natural course of things.
Yeah, it's what sells, Yeah. And it's the same thing like looking at porn. Porn is also fantasy. Just like, porn is no different than going to a romantic comedy in the sense that they're both fantasy. So you watch that, it's not reality. You get this, but that's why you watch it. That's why you're interested in watching movies and porn and all these things, because that's what gets to you. It's just the worst way to learn how to be. So we talked about a little bit how to get the bad boy edge. I want you to describe, like, maybe you can describe, like, what's the perfect balance here? Describe the guy who gets the girl, who has some of these what we call nice guy qualities and some of these bad boy qualities. Because that's what I'm hearing you say is, don't go to the end of the spectrum, but grab from each end and kind of formulate this different type of guy. Is that right?
Yeah. It's more of a dynamic guy. I used to call this the real attraction, REAL, and it was actually an acronym. Let me see if I can remember it. The R was relaxed and resourceful. Relaxed because a guy that is relaxed, that doesn't come across with that kind of anxious edge to him, he communicates kind of a low level, hey, I got this. Nothing's going to trip me up. I can take care of it. If something comes along, I'm cool with it. The resourceful is obvious. You know where to go to get things done. If you need to call on somebody else or pull people together, you know how to do that. E was effective and energized, which means be effective at what you do, have competency, because that's a primary drive for guys. Energized. I see so many guys when I used to go out and I would train them in the field, and they just had this kind of dull blandness about them. They weren't
sluggishness.
Yeah, it was kind of like they were standing behind a wall of their own willpower, kind of not really committing. They weren't really in the game. A was alpha and authentic. Alpha being the good part of alpha, and I can talk about that some other time because there's a lot of imagery around that. But there is a dominant male stereotype that is a good stereotype. Authentic meaning you're being the real you. And then the L was lifestyle and lasting. You make this part of your lifestyle, and it's not something that lives outside of you. It's not something you have to call upon every time you get in front of a woman or you approach her. It's just there, and that's making you very real. So when you're talking about, okay, what are the elements of this bad boy guy? Some of the things that are in it are, well, I used to have an acronym. This will help guys a little bit. I called it MCI, kind of like the old telephone company. And it's masculinity, confidence, and independence. So masculinity incorporates a whole ton of things, but it's most of the things that you simply wouldn't attribute to women for the most part. Maybe it's your interest in sports, maybe it's your desire to compete, your desire to improve and to really go after something. The confidence obviously is something that I had to work on with guys and whatnot, but that's communicated through the authenticity and that lack of anxiousness. And independence was an important one because a lot of guys would go into an interaction with a woman, like they're having a conversation or talking with her, and you could tell he was ready to flex at the first moment she showed disapproval, or he was just going to go along with what she said because he thought that would kiss her ass enough to get her to go along with him. And that's absolutely not what you want to do. You have to have this sense about you that if you have your own opinion, you're going to say it. And you're not doing it because you're going to push the other person away or you have a point to prove. You're just making your stand in a comfortable, compassionate way. And women really, really respect that. That's why I always made it a point, and this is something guys can adopt too, of finding one thing, not necessarily to disagree with, but to express a different opinion or different viewpoint of when you're talking to a
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah. I
Really,
talk
really
about that a
important.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. It's really important to show that you're not just marching on her trail. You're really blazing your own, and you've got your own direction. You've got your own ideas about things, and you've thought about them. You've contemplated them. That's another part of the masculinity part is men contemplate this stuff. That's why we go quiet as we think about stuff. Great book, just an aside that guys should read is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. It's basically a man thinking about what it is to be a man, and it's still valid thousands of years later, 2,000 years later. It's free. It's on the internet everywhere. So
Stoicism.
yeah, exactly. Yep,
Yeah. No,
stoicism is
that
a
stuff,
positive.
that stuff's great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
also
That's,
an
it's
essential element of it.
right. It's this way of, well, I don't know. I'd never read that. So I don't know if that talks about it. But what you're saying in general right now is almost unapologetically being who you are. And that's
Hmm.
the thing is what's cool is when you're just relaxed and being yourself, like actually being yourself, you'll attract more women that way because what most nice guys do is they're not being themselves. They're putting on a facade and acting in a way that just makes sure that they'll do anything to get the girl or person to like them. So that's
Hmm.
where you become very, agreeable. And that's, what you're saying here is you don't need to be that person. You can actually, being more polarizing, having your own opinions, your own thoughts
Hmm.
is going to be actually will get you quite far in being able to attract a woman because
Oh
most
yeah.
people they just don't want to disagree. We're taught to be very nice, but it's a
Agreeable.
fake nice, right? We're taught to be fake nice
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's
from our
not.
parents and from school and from wherever. But that doesn't get anyone anywhere. You want to be true to who you are, and you're going to
Mhm.
attract the right people in your life, and you're going to attract more women in your life because they're going to see that. Wow, I mean, I can basically what I'm about to say is probably somewhere in that acronym. Like you're being a guy who is true to who he is, and there's a confidence in that because you're not
Mhm.
scared to be who you are. I would say that is confidence in itself.
Yeah, I actually, when you said there was really good. My little side traits is one of them is unapologetic behavior. Jerks take it too far. They're beyond unapologetic behavior. They're just behaving however, and they don't care about how people perceive it. That's why nice guys can't go all the way to jerk. They don't do it. That's the number one concern is, hey, Carlos, I can't possibly do this bad boy thing because I don't want to be a jerk. Well, the reality is your awareness of that immediately gives you breaks to stop you from going into jerk territory. It just doesn't happen like that. If you have that compassion and that kind of nice guy edge to you to start with, you're not going to go there. But what'll happen is you may stop short of bad boy, but even that's a far cry and better than the nice guy slash wuss you were being before.
So, how did you make your transformation, or did you make that transformation? Were you a former nice guy, or were you always kind of tapped into the so-called bad boy side, or did you have to make a transformation? Where were you in all this?
Yeah, I always had a little edge of kind of the almost the jerkish bad boy a little bit, and it came from really kind of a narcissistic selfishness, and it was my childhood stuff and whatnot. But it worked itself out. But I went through a phase where I saw that, and then I went and did a complete 180. Like I swung from kind of bad boy all the way over into wussy nice guy because I thought, oh my God, all that time I've been doing women so much wrong. It was horrible. I went into this guilt mode, kind of like what the media is trying to make guys feel like today, like we've done something wrong all this time. And most guys haven't. Not all of us are Harvey Weinsteins or any of these other characters that are just
Yeah, that's a funny thing is most guys are not that way.
no,
I
most like
mean,
99.9%. But we see, right? It's what we see in the media and what is frequently put in front of our eyes. So my transition to answer your question was I did a wild swing on that and I had to kind of find my equilibrium again. So that was the big learning thing for me. It was going all the way over to a nice guy and I was like, what's going on? I'm giving them what they want, whatever they say they need. And I'm getting treated like this. And I started to become bitter and resentful of that. That's what happens to a lot of nice guys is they see themselves doing what they're told to do to make women happy and it doesn't. And they become angry, whiny adolescents about it. And they don't realize that their version of nice guy was really a manipulative kind of jerk in a way, the way they were playing it anyway. So,
but not the good kind, not the one that works.
No, exactly. And there's so many flavors and nuances of this. Just playing around in the in-between territory of, I call it a pendulum swing here. In the middle area is enough to get most women really a lot of the time. Trip, it's just going, it's the ability to swing a little bit, to be a little bit edgy and come back and be nice and then go back and be a little edgy. That little, I call it the delta, the change that you can swing in your social demeanor is really enticing to women. It gives them a flavor of a guy that's three-dimensional and has some complexity to him.
Right. Exactly. No, I mean, listen, I made the same transition. It was a long transition. It's not something that happens overnight. It actually happens over the course of several years, which doesn't mean that you're not going to be attracting women, in several years. There are things that you can do now that can change that, just by the fact of just going out and trying to, I call it entertainment of having a good time in the interaction and trying to make yourself have fun rather than trying to make her have fun. It's called like self-amusement. Right. So there's things you can do like that to tap into it. But yeah, it's going to be something that you train yourself to do over time, to not be so agreeable, to not be scared of what people think about you. And it's going to take, risk in a sense. And when I say risk, I mean, it's not a big risk. It's in your head. It's the risk of you trying on something new in terms of not trying to be so nice all the time and trying to tap into more of who you are and then seeing what happens. What you'll see is that at the end of the day, in your head, you're creating what you think is a big risk, but in reality, it's going to do wonders for you. And by the way, if you start to be more of yourself by speaking your mind and sharing your actual opinions and not catering to other people, if you start to do that stuff, you might see some friends go. You might, unattract the wrong woman. That's fine. That's for the best. That means that you're going to be more in line with who you are, and you'll find the people around you that will be more in line with you. So, I should say to guys, don't be scared of that,
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So what else? Is there any other things you'd like to share with us about the bad boy or creating that edge, or any other advice you want to give to the guys out there that are trying to tap into this? Like, what's like the first step they can do now that they've listened to this, instead of just being some, mental masturbation and some, random podcast they're listening to? What could they do with this to actually start making changes in their life? Any ideas?
Yeah. I can give you some specifics, as guys love little tactics to use and things, little tricks. One, though, that comes to mind, this is really, really important. It kind of goes along with the whole being honest with yourself, is get really, really educated about how women work. I hear, it's like one of the oldest running jokes. I get this, I get that, but I don't get women. you know what? Women are really easy to understand. They don't have a rational logic. They have an emotional logic, which is something that guys don't understand because we're just not open to letting that experience in. We're so used to our own perception. But you can learn women in a way and just really understand. You can't always predict them, but you can understand them, and you should, because that's a vital component of that confidence of knowing when you go in, I know what she's going to probably say. I know what she's probably going to do. I know the kind of things she's going to throw at me. I'm cool with it. I've already got that handled. When you have that feeling in you, that gives you a really stable feel to you, real solidity. Another thing that guys can do, I like to find something whenever I'm out, or when I was out. I'm obviously not out there doing game or any of that stuff, or doing pickup or any of that, or even just meeting women on dates. But when I did, and it wasn't all that long ago, I found things that really helped. One was, and this is a really powerful one, if you can swing it and work it into your meeting with her, is, let's say you're talking to a girl at a bar, or maybe you're meeting up from an online date or an online connection, is find a way to get her to be naughty for you in some way. Get her to take like a risk for you. Get her to do something for you, and do it in a playful way. Like, I'll give an example. If I was sitting at the bar, I remember doing this once or twice, I'd have her reach over and grab a couple of the maraschino cherries out of that little bin that they always have for the mixed drinks. I like, give me a couple of those cherries. She's like, those are for the drinks. No, just grab me a couple. Give me two of them. And she, I keep coaxing her. I'm like, oh, come on, don't tell me you're scared. They're sitting right there. If you ask, they would get it. And getting her to do it. And actually, after a while, they would comply. And that compliance is really, really important, because when a woman feels like she's done that for you, she's assumed, I don't want to say submissive, but it is somewhat passive kind of status to you. And that's very sexually appealing to a woman, is to put herself in that position, because it's a natural thing for women to do in a relationship. This back and forth of energy. When a woman complies with what a guy asks, that triggers something pretty deep in her. And it's a really cool little way to kind of start things down that path. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm curious about something because I feel like we're tapping into two separate things here, unless it's one. Are you saying get her to do something or ask her to do something for you that is kind of like naughty or bad? Or you're just saying in general, and that example happened to be that it was kind of like a naughty, bad thing?
Yeah, good clarification. A little of both, but starts with like what you said. Yes, just get her to do something for you. Like when
Okay.
you're in a bar, and a woman asks you to watch her purse. Okay, that's a total wuss compliance thing. If a guy does that, he's immediately put himself in the nice guy bin, and that's where a
Yeah, or
woman
buying a
starts.
drink or something like that.
Yeah, watch my drink, make sure. I mean, you can be cool about it and say, you can joke with her on that. There's ways around that too, but those are a little more advanced. Yeah, it starts with just getting her to do something for you. But then the next level is to get her to do something naughty, something out of her comfort zone, something that's a little bit of a risk. And the more you start edging her in that territory, the more you're going to see her start to fold into a much more, I was just going to say, compliant attitude in a lot of ways. This is how a lot of the pickup guys would work things to get those sexual encounters on the first night going on. But you don't have to go that far. You just do it to play with it, have fun with that energy, because that really triggers things in women. It really gets them activated in the right way.
That's cool. Yeah. Also, it feels like if you get a girl to do something that's, kind of bad, like, hey, go over there and grab that, or, whatever, or,
Hmm.
steal that person's drink, or I don't know, something bad like that. I feel like that, even though you're telling her to do it, right? So you're not doing it, you're telling her to do it. For some reason, as I'm hearing this, it feels like that bad boy edge is going to
Yeah.
be transferred over to you, even though she's the one doing it. Or if she doesn't do it, she's the one hearing it.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling guys to go off and start telling girls to do illegal things or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but if you make a joke about it, like you have her do, like you make a joke, like you're joking about her doing something illegal or bad, like something over the top that she's clearly not going to do and you're not going to do, I feel like that could be, it transfers over to you. You know what I mean? Like even
Yeah.
if you're like,
Yeah.
what we
And
should do? We should totally just like beat that couple up over there and just like take all their money and run away. Like obviously you're not going to do that and you're joking, but it's almost like you saying that makes you more edgy.
yep. Yep. Exactly. And then you can even kind of throw a little bit of a tease at her, like, "Oh, what? Come on, are you a nice girl? Come on, you know you want to do it, just do it." And then start playing with that energy of being her little devil on her shoulder. Another really good tactic, and this is one that it takes, I wouldn't say it's advanced, but it's one that I think a guy needs to do just for himself, just to kind of affirm his own sexuality and his own willpower. Is, I call it the unbridled sexual power. Is that just give a woman a good look up and down appreciatively, and then let her see you do it. Like look her down and look her up, and just kind of check her out as you're talking to her, and see what she does with that. A lot of women won't say anything. They'll just kind of soak it. Some will say, what? They'll do the insecure thing. Some might do a slightly edgy, angryish type thing, like, what were you looking at? And you just be confident and solid in your own doing that, because that's what women actually do want, by the way. I used to find that was a great way to just kind of weed out women I didn't want to be with, is if they got really offended or weird or angry about that, I'd be like, oh, okay, you just helped me there. Thanks. I'll talk to you later.
I like that. This is cool, man. This is cool talking to you about this stuff. I feel like you have a lot more to add here, and I feel like we should have you on again. And I know this is the second time we've had you on, and we talked about kind of bad boy, nice guy stuff. I feel like you might have more to say in other realms. And I'm trying to draw some more of that advice that you used to give. I know that you're only focusing mostly on women right now, but it's nice to kind of...
It's coming back. It's coming back. And it's nice to hear some of this stuff from a guy who's you're not a nobody. You've been around for a long time. Actually, real quick, because I forgot to do this in the beginning of the episode. Why don't you just tell us like who you are, where you come from? I mean, you're no noob. So. Oh yeah. I've been around a long time. It's funny because way back in the day, I mean, I was friends with all the guys I'm sure have heard of. Like, I actually never hung out with Mystery, but I did go to Mystery's Lounge when I was in Belgrade in Serbia. It was funny. I went to all the places those guys went to, but I was friends with Neil. I was friends with Lance Mason. I dropped off my head there for a second. I'm really good with friends with him. And his
Lance Mason, that's Pickup 101, right?
Yeah.
Is he still around?
He closed that up, I think, a few years back. So no, he's not around anymore. But these are guys that were all in the
They never stick around.
Yeah, I was friends with all those guys, but I was actually not, I always joke that I was the guy that was not in the book, which was fine with me because I didn't need that kind of notoriety or any of that stuff. So yeah, I've been around a while doing this stuff, but my edge has always been, it's not been the pickup side of it, even though I used some of those tactics and things like that. It was always aimed at making men feel grounded in their own masculinity. It was always about the alpha masculinity, as I called it. And that was because that's the vital component. If a guy comes from that place, he doesn't need all the extra stuff. He doesn't need all the tricks, the pickup stuff. He comes from a place of solidity, and you just source that stuff right out of your being. It's really kind of, it's cool the way it happens. And it also solves so much work in terms of this stuff. You don't have to memorize lines. You just go in with the right attitude. And that's what I really focused on with guys.
Cool. I like it. Awesome. Well, Carlos, thanks for being on again. Thanks for doing this. I'm glad we were able to work it out. So if any guys want to work with you, or do you do coaching for guys anymore? Do you have any programs for guys anymore? Is there anything, if guys are really connecting with you here, if they want to learn more from you, is there anywhere where they can go?
Yeah. I'd still do coaching. I'd be happy to do coaching with guys. If they wanted to do a coaching program, I do two forms of coaching. I do an e-coaching, which I'll just interact with you pretty much through an email type system online, or I can do in-person, Zoom calls with you, or I can work on very specific things. But if they want to get more info, the best thing to do is go over to carlosxuma.com, CarlosXuma.com, and just sign up on my newsletter or whatever. I mean, I may have some old stuff in there, but that's one way of doing it. Just go over to badboyformula.com if they want to take a look at that particular program. But sign up, and then I pretty much put all the ways to contact me on the site. If they want to get a hold of me or reach out to get coaching, just do it through there, carlosxuma.com.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes. Carlos, thanks for doing this, and we'll be in touch.
It's great, man. It's good talking to you.